right, guys, so yesterday I gave you to work on this article about two general happenings that took place under the rule of Mao Zedong, okay? Remember the guy took over China in 1949, the non-communists retreat to Taiwan, they create their own country, and then Mao basically transforms China into kind of like a little mini Soviet Union. Whatever Stalin did is what Mao does once he's in charge. And this article went through two major things: the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. What took place during this Cultural Revolution? If you had to like sum it up, what happened during that time? Okay, people are going after politicians and teachers and parents and authority figures. Who did it and why? Mao and his minions, right? Who did he make his minions? Sabrina? The Red Guards, that's what he called them, 100% right. And who was in these Red Guards? I'm thinking more in not terms of social class, more like age group. Emma? Yeah, you guys, children and teenagers. Okay, imagine what would happen, like how you would react to this person. Someone walks in the room right now and says, Cellini is disloyal, he is an idiot, he is dumb. First of all, you're probably gonna laugh, right? And then they're gonna tell you, you have the right to refuse anything he says to do. And in fact, you guys can just run the classroom as you see fit. How are you gonna react to that? Are you going to say, party time? You might take advantage of that. All right, what the communists did was they empowered kids and made them the soldiers on this mission towards instigating like some kind of social change, right? They said teachers are disloyal, right? They're intellectuals. They know different ideas, right? Cellini might go into a classroom and like, I don't know, say something nice about America. We can't have that, okay? Got to get rid of him. He's a threat. And in that time period of Chinese history of trying to purge people who might question the government happens in reaction to that other event that I mentioned, this thing in the article called the Great Leap Forward. Maybe somebody could tell me what they tried to do during the Great Leap Forward in China. Yeah, right, they're trying to push China towards more agriculture and more industry, just like they did in the Soviet Union. What do they do in communism when it's farming? What's the kind of farming that we associate with communism, whether it's the Soviet Union or China during this time period? 100% right? Everything you grow goes to the government and they determine how much you're allowed to keep, and it's not gonna be much, and you can't get more if you work harder. 100% right. Kate? Collective farm, right? Which sounds like it makes sense on paper. Oh, we need more food. How about we put a whole bunch of people together and they can work together on the farm, and if they're cooperating, they'll be more productive. That's like telling a bunch of kids in a class, all right, get into groups of 6 and do the work. You know, not everyone's going to be effective. Some people might be a distraction. Some people might just copy off the other kid. It has been known to fail, and it takes a lot of planning to get it right. The point is, it fails miserably. Millions of Chinese people die as a result of Mao's Great Leap Forward. So imagine you're living in America, right? And whatever policy the government puts in place leads to, I don't know, 20, 40, 60 million people dying. You're one of the survivors. How would you feel now about that government? Not liking them so much, right? You might start to question the quality of that government, how good that leadership is. And that's what happened a little bit under Mao. Understandably so. People start to say, maybe communism isn't all that great. Maybe Mao Zedong is not a great leader. And if you're a communist dictator and you sense that people are going to try to be disloyal to you, you're going to do whatever you can to put that down. And that's what the Cultural Revolution was about. Getting all these kids, brainwashing them into believing that their parents and their teachers are disloyal, and then you're removing them from society. So one of the questions, the big questions in this article was number 8 here. If you're going after all the intellectuals, right, quote unquote the intellectuals, right, so people who are like college professors, doctors, lawyers, surgeons, right, the people who have been exposed in their life to alternate viewpoints, if you target and remove all those people, I think this should be pretty straightforward. What should happen to the quality of that country's education system? Okay, you're going to come out of school not knowing the skills that we want you to learn. You might not know how to do math, science, engineering, computer science, whatever stuff it is. How to construct something out of wood in the wood workshop class, whatever it is. So if there are less qualified people out there, jobs aren't going to open up in that country. Why am I going to open up some kind of engineering firm or weapons manufacturing center if I can't get qualified people to work there? No, I'm going to go build that somewhere else. So you'll have a reduction in job opportunities. The country loses its productivity. It loses its competitiveness with the rest of the world. And then when Mao dies in 1976, China pursues a different path. You got a taste of that guy here. This guy, Deng Xiaoping, institutes free market reforms. The same thing that Gorbachev guy did in the Soviet Union when he decided that pure communism was a failure. But we'll talk more about this guy tomorrow because he's a very complicated figure in history, does a lot of great things, makes China a global superpower, but he's also the guy responsible for that one-child policy stuff that I know you know a little bit about. And we'll see some of the negative side effects of the one-child policy. Let's turn our attention to part 2 CRQ. Okay, we've got 2 documents here, 2 primary sources written by people who experienced the Cultural Revolution firsthand. Okay, that's what a primary source is. And the first question, as it always will be with the CRQ, is this historical circumstances stuff. Emma, if I'm asking you a question about historical circumstances, what am I asking you for? Yeah, what happened in history that made that moment possible, right? So we've got a person here who, again, experienced this Cultural Revolution. And if you get a question about historical circumstances, it's not like, oh, tell me what the person saw in the document or tell me the main idea. No, it's like, oh, man, I have to ask myself, what made this moment possible? So I'm going to read these along with you guys, and then we're going to try to figure it out together. That's why I went over a little bit of the article in the beginning of class today. Ray Yang was a young girl in the spring of 1966 when she became a part of the Red Guards during the Cultural Revolution. In 1997, she published a memoir retelling the story of her life and her family in China throughout the political turmoil of the 50s through the 80s. In this excerpt, she writes about her early experience in the Red Guards. Okay. When the Cultural Revolution broke out in late May 1966, I felt like the legendary monkey Sun Wukong, freed from the dungeon that had held him under a huge mountain for 500 years. Apparently, I was looking into this before, Sun Wukong apparently is a big deal in like Chinese mythology. In some, I forget the name of the book that he appeared in, okay, but it's a literary figure. So I felt like someone who was freed from prison after 500 years. Feels good. It was Chairman Mao who set us free by allowing us to rebel against authorities. So if I'm saying that I've been set free during the Cultural Revolution, am I conveying a sense that this was a good thing or a bad thing? Right off the bat. I've been set free by the Cultural Revolution. Am I embracing the Cultural Revolution or not? I'd say yeah, right? Anyone who sets me free and lets me be independent in class, I'm gonna like that person. Right? So right away, I'm getting the sense that Cultural Revolution was a good thing. She's being freed from repression. As a student, the first authority I wanted to rebel against was Teacher Lin, our homeroom teacher. A big part of her duty was to make sure that we behaved and thought correctly. Ooh, how dare they. Now the time had come for the underdogs to speak up, to seek justice. Immediately, I took up a brush pen, dipped it in black ink, and wrote a long Dazabao. You might ask, what the heck does that mean? A Dazabao is a propaganda poster written to denounce counter-revolutionaries. Right? So denounce means put down. So she's making a propaganda poster calling out her teacher. Right? It's like if you guys like made a Cellini poster of, making fun of me or something, that would be what she did for her teacher. Using some of the rhetorical devices Teacher Lin had taught us, I accused her of lacking proletarian feeling towards her students, of treating them as her enemies, of being high-handed, and of suppressing different opinions. Here's a big word that we should still know. Proletarian or proletariat. That was a Karl Marx word that represented a certain social class. Okay? Yeah, the working class. Right? So she's basically saying that her teacher doesn't know what it means to be a part of the working class. Right? She's like this intellectual elitist, doesn't really know what life is like for regular everyday people. Okay? My classmates supported me by signing their names next to it. Next, we took the propaganda poster to Teacher Lin's home nearby and pasted it on the wall of her bedroom for her to read carefully day and night. This, of course, was not personal revenge. It was answering Chairman Mao's call to combat the revisionist educational line. So she's saying, oh, it's not personal that I'm attacking my teacher. I'm doing it because Mao Zedong is telling me to. Because the teachers, all they do is teach things that oppose Mao's position. That is what revisionist means in this case. All right, so it's made her responsibility to call out her teachers for teaching alternate viewpoints. And that's what teachers do, right? We live in the United States. We have capitalism and democracy. But I'm also teaching you about socialism and communism, right? To expose you to different ideas and make a judgment call for yourself about what the proper thing is. So she's saying, That's not good, right? You should only be teaching what Mao Zedong wants being taught in the classroom. Within a few days, propaganda posters written by students, teachers, administrators, workers, and librarians were popping up everywhere. Right? So I guess the teachers were afraid. Now they're making propaganda posters of their own, maybe calling out other teachers. Secrets dark and dirty were exposed. Every day we made shocking discoveries. The sacred halo around the teachers' heads that dated back 2,500 years to the time of Confucius disappeared. If you guys remember anything from 9th grade about Confucianism, right, there was a huge emphasis on quality education. If you wanted to ever have a good job, you had to pass really rigorous tests, right? So she's saying, oh, all that emphasis on education, it's gone, right? The teachers that repressed us, they have no power anymore. Now teachers must learn a few things from their students. Parents would be taught by their kids instead of vice versa. As Chairman Mao pointed out, government officials would have to wash their ears to listen to the ordinary people. Sounds like somebody's really having a good time embracing all this empowerment given to her by the government, right? Yo, go be independent in class. Call out your teacher for saying things that are contradictory to communism, right? And they'll be rewarded for that, right? All of its freedom now to be independent. So the question is, explain the historical circumstances. And again, this is hard because your answer is not going to come from a document. You got to ask yourself, what the heck happened in history that would have led to this moment of Mao Zedong calling out disloyal people and having kids run around, spy on people and report them and have them removed? So you have to ask yourself, like, why would a leader do that? Why would a leader be trying to remove disloyalty? Or what caused that disloyalty in the first place? We already kind of just talked about it. Yeah, the Great Leap Forward, guys, right? Mao was like, all right, collective farms and stuff. It'll be good. Millions of people die, they start questioning him, and he's not having it. Right? So the Great Leap Forward and people questioning him is what leads to him trying to root out all these supposedly disloyal people. So that's what we're going to put for our answer here. It's the regents. They're going to expect full sentences. How should I start my answer? Look at that. Restate some of the question. Beautiful. Let's all do that together. One historical circumstance that led to the Cultural Revolution in China was, and I will simply state a specific event. I will say was the Great Leap Forward. It's really not enough to just mention something that happens beforehand. You have to kind of tie it to the event, right? So we have to make this connection between the failure of the Great Leap Forward and the Red Guards rooting out potential disloyal people, right? So I'm just going to explain that a little bit, right? This caused mass numbers of people to question the rule of Mao Zedong due to the famine resulting from collective farms, right? Without that collective farm failure, you wouldn't have people speaking out. And if you don't have people speaking out, there wouldn't be a cultural revolution, right? Everyone would just be on his side. That's all. That's all I have to do here. Just explain what led to that event. Let's look at the next document here. Under the Red Sun memoir. Under the Red Sun is a memoir written by Fan Chao about her experiences during the Cultural Revolution, published in 2005. Here is an excerpt from the memoir. Okay, so both of these people are recording their experiences about this event a couple of decades later, right? So maybe, we would call into question the reliability a little bit, but based on this representation, it does seem she has a pretty good memory of what happened. I was a 7th grader when the Cultural Revolution broke out. Growing up in the new China, the China that's communist, we were fed with revolutionary ideas bathed in the red sunlight of Mao. We worshiped Mao the same way pious Christians worship their God, and we were completely devoted to him. I myself really believed that we were working for a paradise on earth, and we were going to save the entire world. How glorious it was to have the great destiny of liberating all humanity. In fact, we did not even understand what revolution was and how other people in the world really lived. Right? All she has is this tunnel vision of Chinese communist society, not really understanding other ways of life. Right? So of course you're going to support it. It's the only thing you know. That's basically what she's saying there. I was not allowed to join the Red Guards simply because my grandparents were rich before the communists took away their land. Remember, no private property in communism. And my parents were considered intellectuals, which automatically made them anti-revolutionists, regardless of the fact that they had been following Mao's idealism since their early adulthood. Right? Intellectuals meaning teachers, doctors, lawyers, people who went to college and stuff. As members of the university faculty is teachers, My parents were obviously in trouble. I, of course, was guilty by association. So if she's saying in trouble, guilty, is her general point of view so far positive or negative about this event? Maybe a little bit fuzzy, still hard to tell. Let's keep going then. Only a 13-year-old girl, I became a target of the revolution. If I'm calling myself a target, is that good or bad? Probably bad, right? Meaning people are trying to come after me. I don't think I would say that if I supported something. After that, I lost all my friends and lived in perpetual fear for several years. Despite this unbearable life, it did not dare challenge my belief in the revolution. Instead, I wondered if it might be my parents who had done something wrong. Sounds like she's being brainwashed a little bit. I wrote a propaganda poster denouncing them to show my loyalty to Mao. My naivety, deeply wounded the feelings between my parents and me, right? If I'm naive about something, I don't know the full story, right? As I grew up, I slowly learned the truth behind the so-called revolution. I also realized that my family and I were relatively lucky compared with hundreds and thousands of innocent people who died in the endless political movements. I am very remorseful and I still feel shaken as I think back on what happened during the Cultural Revolution. Point of view. Just for the sake of review. Lindsay, what's point of view?
Like
how they felt about it. Right, so how did she feel? And it's not enough to just simply say she liked it or didn't like it. We got to be a little more specific. How did she feel about this? Bridget, how did she feel about the Cultural Revolution? What do you think? Okay. All right, so let's put that in, right? So let's try to summarize that. Fan Chao's point of view regarding the Cultural Revolution was, just going to paste that here, was that maybe it caused more harm to China instead of bringing positive change. Like she thought maybe it'd be a good thing in the beginning, whereas instead it harmed China. It was a bad thing for China. Am I done? What do I do next? This can be inferred from a document when it states. So we have to find something in that document, either quoted or paraphrased, that supports this idea that it brought harm to China. Can we find something that sounds like it was harmful? Okay, right, innocent people died in the endless political movements. If innocent people are dying, I would absolutely agree that it brought harm to China. That's a great call. So I'm going to paraphrase that. So I'm going to simply say when it states that innocent people lost their lives during this time period. Very good. We got one more. And I think out of all the CRQ style questions where you have to use two documents, I think the similarity and difference one might be the trickiest. Okay, because what you have to do is you got to do three things. You have to state how the documents are similar or how they're different, and then give it an example from each document. And you got to be more, you can't just simply be like, oh, the documents are similar because they both talk about China. Or the documents are similar because they both talk about the Cultural Revolution. That's too general. They're not going to really appreciate that. Okay? So I think a difference, we're going to practice similarity, but I think a difference could be, right, that the person in document 2 has a negative point of view, or brought harm, she has a feeling that it brought harm to China, where in document 1, it's different because the author's claiming that the Cultural Revolution gave her a sense of freedom that she never had, which is positive. But I want to practice similarity. Is there anything similar in these two documents on a more specific level than just simply, oh, they're both writing about the Cultural Revolution? They both were brainwashed. Interesting. Let's do that. So I will say, one similarity between documents 1 and 2 was that the authors were brainwashed by their government. So we have to give an example of people being brainwashed now in document 1 and an example of people kind of being brainwashed in document 2. What's a good example of people being brainwashed in document 1? When she made a propaganda poster? Okay, let's see. So she made a propaganda poster against her teacher, right? And calling her teacher an enemy. Cool, so let's put that down. So let's give examples. For example, comma. In document 1, comma, the author discussed how she was encouraged to make a propaganda poster about her teacher being an enemy of the government. Period. 2 out of 3 parts down. We just need one more thing. We just have to now find an example of brainwashing in document 2. And in that sense, we now show that both documents show people being brainwashed. She was brainwashed into thinking that her parents were up to no good, right? Where was that line? I wondered if it might be my parents who had done something wrong. Right, so now she's thinking that her parents are enemies of the state. So we'll say here, similarly, right, which is a nice transition word to indicate that I'm now going to write about similarity. In document 2, comma, the author mentions how she was made to believe that her parents were enemies of Mao Zedong. If you were to quote the line from the document directly, you would get credit for that. I like to paraphrase, especially when if it's the Regents and I'm going to be handwriting the test and I want to avoid writing massive chunks of a paragraph. If you wrote this, it would be perfectly acceptable. Okay? So I identified a clear similarity, and now I backed it up with examples from each document that show basically the same thing going on.